Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the HoopBall Fantasy YouTube channel. My name is Srochi, and I'm joining you today on this Saturday. I hope you're enjoying your weekend, and if you're just viewing some other time, I hope whatever's going on that day is going well. It's a little last minute, but we figured that we would go ahead and hop on the air and just talk a little bit about some of the big news that's happening this weekend. Obviously, we're talking about the ramifications of the trade deadline that just passed, and in particular, the news of the day. All-star center Nikola Vucevic is making his Chicago Bulls debut tonight. They are going up against, I should know this, it doesn't really matter who they're going up against, I suppose, but they're playing the San Antonio Spurs tonight. Vucevic is assumed to be available. Al-Farouq Aminu, who also came back in that trade, is going to be available, as will Troy Brown Jr., and Javonte Green. The other big acquisition for the Bulls at the deadline, Daniel Theis, will not be available to play, but he will be with the team. So there's a lot to unpack here. And I think that the Bulls are probably the most interesting post-trade deadline team from a fantasy perspective, which most people aren't focused on entirely. A lot of people are excited about the Orlando Magic and the Houston Rockets, who have, understandably so, they're more exciting from fantasy basketball because they're moving guys out. So new guys are just going to step into their roles and take on new elements to their fantasy games, more responsibility, creates some more value. For the Bulls, the opposite is going to happen. We have tons of talented players coming in, and they're taking on roles that they're outsized for. The minutes that are going out in the form of Wendell Carter Jr., Otto Porter Jr., Daniel Gafford, and Luke Cornett are not equal to what's coming in Vucevic, Theis, Troy Brown, Aminu. So I want today to just very briefly, this isn't going to be a very long show. We're just going to I'm going to just highlight the big things to watch for. It's like a pregame show, but it's only about the Bulls. For this game and going forward, what are we going to keep our eyes on, and what does it all mean going forward for your teams? The big question we need to start with is, if you have Nikola Vucevic on your team, you're probably thinking, how bad is this going to be for him? Like, he's going from being the man in Orlando, and he's going to now share the floor with Zach LaVine in Chicago. Still going to be very featured, obviously, probably going to play a good amount too, but what does that mean for your fantasy teams? You've been having a guy returning first-round value on the year. Is that going to hold up? My guess would be no. Probably not. He is the 12th ranked player in 9 category leagues on a per game basis, and he's playing in all of his games, so by totals he's even higher than that. In Chicago, I don't even think I think that this is still going to be a Zach LaVine-centric offense. A lot of these, a lot of Chicago's play sets this year have just flowed through him. I mean, this is going to be, you're certainly going to see him learn to be a little more passive, I feel like. You're going to see him defer to Vucevic more, who is going to command his own offense in the post. I think that we're going to see a larger emphasis on post play that, Wendell Carter Jr. never really was able to acclimate himself to in the NBA. He wasn't really used that way, but Vucevic can do a lot of the things that people were hoping that Carter Jr. could. One of Vucevic's strong suits in fantasy is his ability to distribute from the center position. I think Chicago is going to want to continue utilizing that. You've seen it with Thad Young this year, who's really upped his game as a passer. Chicago runs lots of plays for their big men to get others involved. That's probably why they were so interested in Vucevic, because he's one of the better playmaking bigs in the NBA right now. So the issue with Vuce isn't that like his style of play is going to be muted per se. Like, I think he's going to play similarly, but it all is going to come down to those shots for him to maintain that first round value. He's been taking close to 20 per game this year, and that's been out of necessity. That has not been by design. As you all know, Orlando has really just been all over the map with injuries this year. So the expectation, and Vucevic had to fill in those gaps a lot. So I think the expectation is that you're going to see a reduction in shots to the point where, he might not be scoring 25 a night, but he could still get to around the 20 point per game range. The question here, I'm sort of meandering, but the question that we need to be asking is, how big is this hit going to be? Should we expect him to drop down to a second round value, third round? Like, do you try and sell him before that moment happens? Do you want to trade him off now and see if you can get a first round player in return? I mean, if you want to try that, you can. I don't think that you're going to get many successful offers in doing something like that, but B, I don't know if he's going to be hurt that bad in like the overall rankings category, because there's a lot of separation between being the 12th best player on a per game basis and being like the 17th best player on a per game basis, or the 20th, the 25th. There's, Vucevic, even if he took the dinks that we're anticipating he will, there's a chance that he could still be a top 20 fantasy player. I still think that's possible. I'm probably going to hold, because I feel like people are going to undersell you on him. But if you have trade offers that you want to explore for Vucevic, feel free to, if you have him on your team or you want to try and acquire him, drop some in the chat. Maybe I can bring some up during the show and we can see if that would be a worthwhile, ad or pursuit. But in my mind, I'm just watching to see how many shots he's going to get on a per game basis, whether or not those playmaking opportunities are still going to be available for him. Just in the Chicago offense that has built a considerable amount of their play sets around big men making plays. And just really, how willing is Zach LaVine to defer to another all-star caliber player? This is going to be he's the best player that LaVine's ever played with. Vucevic will be. The questions around him are pretty much the same. And just, do we see him continue to be the guy in Chicago that holds the biggest brunt of the offense? Do we see an even split between he and Vooch? Do we see LaVine's playmaking go up in some capacity? Do we see maybe his efficiency improve if he's with less focus on him? Maybe if you have Vooch at the top of the key making stuff happen for other people, maybe LaVine can get a little more involved off ball. It's a lot of interesting questions about how those two stars interact with each other. In fact, you could make the argument that for each other, they are the most talented players that either has ever played with. And their games just have they've never had an opportunity to mesh with someone of their respective calibers at their respective positions. So it's all good. If they maintain the same level of shots, though, like Vucevic is still at 17 per game and Zach LaVine is still around that number 2, which is possible, I think that both ultimately in the end still stick around. They'll take dents, but they'll still roughly be second round players. A great example is the Brooklyn Nets. At least, well, actually, no, they're not a great example because they've torn down everyone else around their superstars. But a lot of people were scared when James Harden came in that he was going to destroy the fantasy values of everyone around, that all three of KD, Kyrie, and Durant were going to take away from each other. And yeah, Durant's missed a lot of time, but when those 15 or so games that those three played together, they were all close to first round level players. They found a way to make it work. Chicago is not quite in that same position, but I have some level of confidence that Vooch and LaVine can still maintain top 2 or second round level values. That's my take for the time being. We don't know yet. No one knows because they have yet to play a game, but we're just watching stuff at the moment. Question from Justin in the chat here. He wants to know, Nikola Vucevic or Zion for the rest of the year in fantasy? So, Justin, I'm going to go ahead and assume that this is just 9 category leagues. Feel free to correct me in the chat if it's some other setting. But from a 9 category perspective, I think I'm probably still going to go with Vucevic being marginally better than Zion rest of the year. I need to pull up, I suppose, Zion's rankings as of late because I know that he's been on a tear over the last couple of months. So, I mean, if you want to believe that Zion is going to outpace Vucevic, you need to believe that he's going to be playing at a second round level the rest of the way. Because I think that Vucevic is still going to be within that top 25. For Zion's part, over his last month of action here, just looking this up on the fly, seeing him. Oh yeah, he's been number 61 in 9 category leagues on 28 points per game. He's being strong field goal percentage, but he's weighed down by his free throw percent and his lack of threes, and that's honestly going to hold. That's the kind of stuff that he's still a ways away from working out to get to that second round pace. I mean, the numbers jump off the page, but those in a 9 category setting, the percentages and the lack of other sort of peripheral stats like defensive and threes are going to keep Zion, I'd say, well below Vucevic in a category leagues. In a point setting, it might be a little bit closer, but I think I'd still feel stronger about Vooch just because he's going to be in a featured role. The Bulls are going to be competitive, and they're going to want to get as much time out there as they can, trying to get their stars to get familiar with one another. And yeah, a little bit off topic, but I'll just jump on it right here because it just should be yelled and screamed from any which way until the Celtics give us a reason not to from the Gale. Robert Williams is a priority add if he's on your waiver wire anywhere. I don't care. Go ahead and add him right now. The line last night was disgusting. He had 9 rebounds, 6 assists, 5 blocks. Rebounds and blocks are probably going to be consistent there, not the assists. But yeah, go ahead and grab Zion, y'all. I mean, not Zion. Time Lord, the new Zion Williamson, Robert Williams. So obviously, we're going to be watching that dynamic tonight. The other things that we need to pay attention to for the Bulls is going to revolve around the rest of this team because look, they went under a serious rotation change before these deals went down, and I'd argue that they're bringing in more regular rotation players than they sent out. Take a look at. I want you guys to take a look at something. So since March 14th. The Bulls switched their rotation to start Tomas Satoransky over Kobe White and Thad Young over Wendell Carter Jr. Over that stretch of time, here are the minutes per game. Here are the minutes per game and shots per game of the Bulls players that they just sent out over the deadline. And take a look at the comparison here to these guys who are coming in. Now, this isn't taken in the wrong context. The numbers on the right those are season-long totals, and I know there's a ton of different variables that go into that, but just focus on the left side for the moment here. Since they made that lineup switch, Wendell Carter Jr. in a bench role was only playing 20 minutes per night. He was only taking, 6 shots per game. I'm going to get out of fantasy value going into this new setup here because, look, he's still playing a lot, but I'd argue that the Bulls need more Thad Young minutes than they need Lauri Markkanen minutes. Oh, am I muted? Can y'all hear me now? Uh-oh. Well, that's what you get for trying something new on a show like this, but how about that? Can you guys hear me now? I'm going to assume that, all right. Well, if you guys take a look, sorry about that, everyone. Technical difficulties. That's the fun of doing stuff live, I guess. The point I was making when I had that graphic up there is just take a look at the minutes that have been, the way that this team has been oriented recently. The guys that they just sent out, even though they were big rotation players previously, the way the Bulls have been playing as late, do not feature them heavily. Carter Jr. and Otto Porter, only 20 minutes per night off the bench. So now we're just going to have to take a look at, try and figure out what that means going forward for these other guys here. Daniel Tice, they brought him in to be a consistent backup center. I think he plays about 20 minutes per game. He doesn't have any fantasy value per se, but he's going to make serious questions for Lauri Markkanen and Thaddeus Young. I think his presence, no doubt, is going to cause that. He is going to particularly for Thad, I think has really upped his production as a backup center, playing center minutes. They like I've mentioned at the top, the Bulls like to run offense through their big guys. Does Thad still play any of those backup center minutes? Does Lauri Markkanen play any? Or are those two just splitting the power forward minutes amongst each other? That's going to be a big issue if that's the case, because at the moment, they're both top 100 players. If they're both playing about 24 minutes per night, that's going to make things a little dicey. It might be a bigger issue for Markkanen, because Thad was already playing close to that amount of time already. But if Markkanen's only seeing 24 minutes per game, and you have 30 minutes for Vucevic, 20 for Tice, 24 for Thad Young, of that four-man front court combination, I think I'm only confident that Vucevic has value, and then maybe Thad Young. And Young's going to take a hit. But Markkanen, I mean, look, the guy is hanging on to what are we talking here? He's been a top 124 player since the Bulls made their lineup switch in a 29-minute per game role on 12 shots per game. That doesn't bode well for him going forward. In fact, if I have Markkanen on my team, my approach would probably be to see if I can sell him for a top 100 player the rest of the way. Unless you believe that he's going to overtake Thad Young and command a majority of the power forward minutes, I mean, good luck with that. Thad Young has been the Bulls' second best player this season. Now he's their third. And I think he's still going to hold on to 24 minutes. And if Daniel Tice comes in and he plays 20 minutes too, Markkanen's not going to have enough opportunity to be a 9-category league contributor. So he's someone I'm really focused on too going forward. And, I'm very reluctant to believe that he still comes out of this as the kind of player that everyone wants him to be. There's just not going to be shots or opportunity there for him. From Dan, do we see any change in Patrick Williams rest of season? And yeah, Dan, I think that's another name that we need to pay close attention to as well. He has not really been much of someone on the fantasy radar. I mean, we're talking like since that lineup switch, he's been about a top 170 player, and that's pretty consistent for where he's been on the season. He's still going to start. Troy Brown's presence is not going to alter his rotation drastically at all. I don't even know if Troy Brown plays, but I mean, Williams, he's going. Think of the four guys that I brought up just now: Daniel Tice, Nikola Vucevic, Thad Young, Lauri Markkanen. Where's Pat Will going to play power forward minutes in that grouping? If he's relegated to just a small forward role, that's less rebounding. That's probably less efficient shots for him, less chance of defensive stats, particularly at blocks. It's not going to be good for his rest of season outlook, I don't think. In fact, when you really want to boil things down here, top 100 guys for the Bulls rest of the way. I think Nikola Vucevic and Zach LaVine are pretty obvious ones. I think Thad Young still has a chance because he's still productive in 24 minutes, and there's a feasible avenue for him to get there. He might be more close to the top 90 range than the top 80, 70 range we've seen, but I don't really see anyone else in that front court making a dent there. Pat Will, he'll have opportunity, but look, these Bulls are in win now mode. They don't have time. Development is an interest of theirs. Their moves indicate that it's also very much a back burner thing. So that doesn't bode well for his outlook, I don't think. The one other name that we should touch on, though, I mentioned three guys that I think could have top 100 value in this new Bulls setup. There's a potential for a fourth, and that is Tomas Satoransky, the new starting point guard for the Chicago Bulls. In that 7-game stretch, he has been in the top 100 range, about 80-ish. He's been averaging 10, I think he's been about top 80 in 9-category leagues, about 10 points per game, 6 assists, close to 3 rebounds, and almost a steal and a half. Very productive stuff. The efficiency's been great too. I'm optimistic, cautiously optimistic, but optimistic that Satoransky stays in the starting lineup because of this greater emphasis on winning for Chicago. And I think that he could still contend for that top 100 value. I mean, he is someone at this stage of the year, if he's on your waiver wire, there's a good chance that he's going to be the best source of assists going forward. And that's a very scarce category. That's really hard to make up for when, you are going to think about your teams right now. How many players have you found on the waiver wire that have really contributed in assists, who've gotten you about 6 per game? That's really impactful stuff. Kobe White's not contributing to winning in that starting group. He's redundant next to Zach LaVine. He doesn't make good decisions as a distributor. He takes inefficient shots. He's still trying to figure out how to acclimate his game to the NBA, the competitive NBA scene. It's one thing when you're going on 30-point runs when there's no expectations, but the Bulls need to make a playoff push. That's what this is all about. I think that means that Coby White is far better suited in a bench role where he can be a six-man scoring type and he can come in for 25 minutes and jack up shots while the stars are getting some rest. That's good for Satoransky. You want him to be with these starting units. You want him to do a little pick and roll action with Nikola Vucevic. You want to see him move around off ball, get himself open for corner threes when Zach LaVine's running the show. He's someone I'd be looking to pick up if he's been on the wire in your league right now. Because we were all sort of on the fence about what it all meant for him when it first happened, when like the lineup change happened. We're thinking, Sato, I mean, the Bulls could go either way here. Yeah, we know they want to make a playoff push, but they're still developing. They still want to see what Coby White can do. Maybe this is just to energize White, get him to sort of fix some kinks in his game and then jump back in. I think it's different circumstances now. I think that this is a Bulls team that really wants to hit the ground running and secure a top 5 playoff spot. It is wide open in the East. Satoransky contributes to winning, and he is going to be worthwhile, I think. So let's just, and again, apologize for the audio issues later. We want to implement more graphic stuff on these shows. So it's just not me in a box talking at all y'all, but we'll make sure we work those out next time. I want to just summarize everything that we've talked about here. For the Bulls, you want to watch the shot distribution for Nikola Vucevic. Is it coming down? Is it staying the same? What does his looks like? What kind of shots is he getting in the offense? Where are they coming from? Is he primarily going to be played in the post? Is he going to be doing stuff on the perimeter? You want to watch the role, the role in the offense, the time he's out there, and how he and Zach LaVine interact with each other, all to assess how far we can expect him to drop in the standings, the rankings, the fantasy value rankings. The other things we want to watch very closely: Lauri Markkanen's role in this new Chicago Bulls setup. Is he going to be phased out by Thad Young and Daniel Tice, taking opportunities for him to play close to 30 minutes a night? If he's not playing 30 minutes, I mean, he's probably not going to have fantasy value. I would be trying to sell him before that time comes where it's evident that he is not going to be a contributor for your fantasy leagues. So sell high, top 100, top 80 player. Lauri's got name value. I don't think he's got fantasy value going forward. Thad Young, is he still worth a spot on your roster? You're definitely holding, waiting to find out. See what his role looks like. Does he still get to do some of the playmaking stuff that has made him such a great fantasy player this year? Does he still play 24 minutes? How much does Daniel Tice play off the bench? Patrick Williams, we're watching to see just if anyone comes for his minutes. Does Troy Brown make a dent? I mean, I love Troy Brown's fantasy game. I know he's a big name at HoopBall. Brew was really high on him as just a player in his rankings, and the Wizards just criminally mismanaged him his whole time there. Does Chicago go and say, hey, Troy Brown, play 20, 25 minutes a night? If Troy Brown's playing 25 minutes a night, he's probably an ad in standard leagues, but I don't know. That we're not going to project for that. We're mostly watching the main guys, and then we're watching Satoransky. Does he hold on to the starting job? I think he does. I think he should. And if he does, he's an easy top 100 player the rest of the season. So those are the big ones. Guys, please drop a like on this video if you want to see more stuff, team-focused analysis like this. Subscribe to the channel for more videos like this. We're going to be on the scene and make sure that we are there to break down any stuff any big moves that coming up. I know we have the buyout market. We're surely going to do videos on that when Andre Drummond finds a new team, when Gorgie Dang finds a new team. Aldridge is probably going to the Heat. But yeah, guys, we are just watching the Chicago Bulls. Watch this game carefully and just watch how the stars interact with each other, how these front court minute rotations go, and whether the starting point guard dynamic sticks from what we've seen over their last 7 games or so. So that's going to do it for me. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, everyone, and we will check back in with you next time.